Greetings, fellow humans. I'm MartianBuu, and today I want to talk about the balance patch that just went live and how it's going to affect the wild format. The convenient image I'm using here was put together by HearthstoneTopDecks.com, so thank you to them for that. First up, we have Battle-Worn Vanguard. Was a 2-mana 2/2 after your hero attacks summon 2 1/1 Felwings, is now a 2-mana 2/1. Demon Hunter wasn't seeing that much play in Wild, but when people tried to make it work, this was one of the cards they went to. It's going to be a little harder to experiment with Demon Hunter with this change, but it's not going to actively change anything seeing play right now. Similarly, we have Carryall Felsoul. Was a 6-mana 6/6 Battlecry, transform into a 6/6 copy of a demon in your deck, is now a 7-mana 7/7 with the same effect. Part of what was nice about Carryall is that she allowed you to play those demons a turn earlier, which if you're going for an 8-cost demon still works, but it was mostly for Xylag, and when I've tried it in Wild, I also used Priestess of Fury. So Carryall no longer cheats mana, but it does still give you an extra copy on the same turn that you could have played those if you haven't drawn them yet. Again, Demon Hunter wasn't really a thing in Wild, so most of us won't notice this nerf, but I'm a little sad. It might still be good, but in Wild, we still need the rest of that deck. Notably, you can play it in Odd Demon Hunter now, so if you wanted to try a mid-range Xylag, Priestess of Fury, Carryall, Felsoul deck, now is the time. Next up, we have Earthen Scales. 1 mana, give a friendly minion +1/+1, then gain armor equal to its attack, is now 2 mana for the same effect. So this was actually something I was worried about when the core set was announced initially. It's fun to see a wild card return, but things get changed so often in Standard nowadays that something being playable in Standard means it's very likely going to be a nerf target. Earthen Scales is relevant in Wild, but it's hardly the problem when it comes to Druid decks that are a little over the top. So this is just a Standard change. The solution I would like when wild cards get brought back to the core set and cause problems in Standard is just to remove them from the core set. Now that there's precedent for returning wild cards getting nerfed for Standard's sake, I'm a little less excited to see wild cards come back to Standard because it means that there's a decent chance that if it's good, it's going to get changed. Overall, I'm not going to mourn Earthen Scales specifically. It's not a card that I'm especially attached to. It's just I would have liked them to handle it differently. I don't know how hard it is to just kind of remove a card from the core set, so it could be that this is the best option, or they're planning on Earthen Scales staying there for a long time, so they want to get it in kind of a balanced position. But just wanted to touch on it because it was a concern of mine, and it ended up happening. So the upside of this going to 2 for Wild is Geist doesn't destroy it anymore. Platebreaker remains an obnoxious tech card for the Linecracker deck, so I don't know that that really matters that much. In fact, I'm pretty confident it doesn't really matter at all. But this does add mana to the Linecracker turn, which I think won't matter a lot of the time, but will matter sometimes. So I don't know how much this is actually going to affect the viability of Linecracker as an archetype in Wild in either direction. From the Depths was 3 mana, reduce the cost of the bottom 5 cards in your deck by 3, then Dredge is now 4 mana with the same effect. This going from odd to even is kind of a hit to the potential for Odd Warrior. I played around with it a bit in Odd Warrior and it felt kind of strong. Odd Warrior wasn't there. It's not like it was a deck that was seeing a lot of play, but it felt like it was close, like it only needed a little bit more to get there. And now it's lost this giant mana cheating tool, so I don't expect that to happen anytime soon. This is a card that from me playing Standard felt like it really needed a change, so I think it's a good change. But it's another one of those cards that its nerf prevents the potential for a Wild deck. It's not changing anything that's currently playable in Wild. Lightforged Carryall was a 7 mana hero, is now going to be an 8 mana hero with the same effect. Lightforged Carryall isn't really getting played widely in Wild at the moment, but it has been in relevant decks in the past. At 8 mana, I think the effect is still very good, but a turn slower is going to matter. I've definitely been in a bunch of positions where I would have won the game if Carryall hadn't happened the turn that it did. But I don't think it's enough that a Paladin deck that would have seen play otherwise won't see play. I expect we'll see Carryall back in Wild as soon as there's 29 other cards to go with it. Something notable is this is an even card now, and I think one of the big reasons not to play even Paladin before was you couldn't play Carryall, and Carryall is one of the most busted things that Paladin can do. So if you're looking for something to experiment with, Lightforged Carryall is accessible in even Paladin now. Mr. Smite was a 6 mana 6/5 pirate. Your pirates have charge is now a 7 mana 6/5 with the same effect. I wasn't expecting a Smite nerf. I kind of welcome it because I don't really like Smite myself, but I am a little surprised to see it. So the big deck that this affects in Wild is Pirate Rogue. I'm on the fence about whether this is getting cut from that deck or not, because it's still a very powerful effect at 7 mana, but a turn later is significant. I've been in a lot of positions where Smite on curve was the only thing that beat me. Having that delayed a turn means that a lot of slower decks are going to be able to stabilize in preparation for this turn. Mr. Smite is already the most expensive card in the deck by 3 if you don't factor in the 0 mana cards that technically have a 4 mana base. So making the most expensive card be even more expensive isn't anything to scoff at. I think that this is going to at least matter, but I don't know that it kills Smite. How good is Smite in an odd deck? If Odd Rogue was a thing, I would maybe think that it had some potential, but I don't know what else would be running enough pirates to justify this. Here's a nerf. Nellies Pirate Ship, the appendage on the Nelly Colossal Minion, is going from add Nelly's Pirate Crew to your hand, they cost 1, to add Nelly's Pirate Crew to your hand, they cost 1 less. That is a huge nerf. This card has been destroyed. The reason this was seeing play in standard is because you could get a 1 mana Smite off of it and then charge all of those pirates into your opponent's face. If you didn't get a Smite, the card was underwhelming, and if you would never get Smite, you probably wouldn't include it in the deck at all. Going to 1 less is huge. So you can still get a Smite, but now you're getting an unnerfed Smite instead of a buffed by 5 mana Smite. This card is going to go from being a relevant standard card to being a forgettable card. Next up, we have School Teacher. Was a 4 mana 5/4, add a 1/1 Noggling to your hand, discover a spell that costs 3 or less and teach it to it. Now it is a 4 mana 4/3 with the same effect. I feel like this card is kind of beloved. The sense I got is a lot of people really liked it. It didn't feel oppressive to me necessarily, at least any more so than other Discover effects. Having Bran around made it a little obnoxious in Control Warrior, but they're getting so many other nerfs. I don't know that it needed to be nerfed for that. I'm a little surprised at the nerf to this one. Maybe it's just trying to lower the power level of cards overall, so that when new cards come out soon, they'll see more play. It wasn't seeing any play in Wild before. Wild's not going to notice this change. Shield Shatter, going from a 10 mana frost spell, deal 5 damage to all minions, cost 1 less for each armor you have, to dealing 4 damage. Lowering the damage makes sense because this card was obviously meant to be a combo with Frozen Buckler, so you could play the Buckler for 2 and then get the clear with this. So you want it to cost 10 so that that combo exists. Dealing 5 damage felt like a lot, and going down to 4, it should still be a good card, but it'll miss some things that it would clear before. Again, Warrior not much of a thing in Wild. I don't think we'll notice this change too much. Smite Lash Siren was a 4 mana 2/5 after you play a Naga, refresh 2 mana crystals, then switch to spell, is now going to be a 5 mana card with the same effect and 1 more health. Naga Mage wasn't a thing in Wild, we're not going to notice this. Tidal Revenant was an 8 mana 5/8 elemental. Battlecry, deal 5 damage, gain 8 armor, is going to be the same thing except 5 armor instead of 8. When I saw this card, I thought it was so cool, and I also thought it would be super unplayable, and I'm shocked it's getting nerfed. It saw a ton of play in Standard, but it felt like, you know, borderline arena card, but it was the type of card that I like to see play in constructed formats. So kind of funny that a card like that is actually worth nerfing. It was slow for Wild when it gave 3 more armor. We won't notice this change, but I think that it might disqualify it from future consideration. Then Wildpaw Noel is going to split the difference. It's been nerfed before and then fully reverted, and now it's going to go from its original form, 5 mana 4/5 rush, cost 1 less for each card you've added to your hand from another class, to the same effect with 3 attack. I've been having a lot of fun playing goofy Noel rogue things in Wild. I think Noel is a really fun card, and I'm a little sad to see it go because I've been having a lot of fun playing with it recently. Maybe it's still good this way. I do think that the 3 attack hits the breakpoint most of the time in Wild. You want to be hitting things like Dread Corsair, Fellwing, Ship's Cannon. It does hurt a little, but maybe it's still a very, very good card. Where we're going to notice this is the Mine Rogue deck, but I still don't think that this is going to be enough to change the viability of that. necessarily. Will probably still be a decent card, but I'm still a little sad to see it changed. Finally, we have the one wild exclusive change in Lightning Bloom. Big Shaman, after receiving Neptulon in the midi set, has been pretty crazy on the wild ladder. Turn 1 Neptulons and Yasha'arj and stuff like that is a little bit too soon for a 10 cost card. Wild is in a state where you can actually deal with big minions on 4 or 5. So on their face, Call and Muckmorpher aren't really that problematic. You can do things with a slower deck against those things by that time. But most things can't deal with a turn 1 or 2 Neptulon. So clearly Lightning Bloom is the issue. It is going from 0 mana, gain 2 mana crystals this turn only, overload 2, to 0 mana, refresh 2 mana crystals, overload 2. This means that you can't use it to play an expensive card turns early, but you can still use it to play more cards in a turn. This is going to make Big Shaman much worse. I think it's going to go back to being people's pet decks. Turn 5 and 6 is not reliable enough. Losing out on the turn 1 and 2 high rolls is going to shave a decent percentage off the win rate of those decks. I'm really happy with this change. This is exactly what I would have done. So good job, Blizzard, on that one. This does affect more decks. Druid has kind of shifted to a all-in mana cheat class, so it's not really running like Spreading Plagues and stuff like that anymore. It's just running everything that can high roll early mana, including this card. So it's going to get cut from most Druid decks, I think. There's an argument for Linecracker, because that's a deck that needs to play more cards in a turn, not just play cards early. Same thing with Alignment Druid. This still does cheat as much mana post alignment as long as you've played like Biology Project or Nourish or something. But in both cases, this never lets you play Guff early. It never lets you play Scales early. It's a much more restrictive card. So I think it's probably getting cut from most Druid decks. The one place where I think that this will get used and will barely notice the nerf, if at all, is Frog Shaman. Frog Shaman uses this to play more cards in a turn, generate overload, and draw, and it still does all those things with this new effect. You're not trying to like Lightning Bloom out a frog on turn 1. You want to have the frog out and then play Lightning Bloom. So it still has a deck. I like this change. I think it's really healthy for Wild moving forward. So yeah, I'm pretty pleased. That about covers everything. Let me know in the comments what you would have liked to see changed, if you're happy with these changes. Remember to like and subscribe to support the channel, and thank you so much for watching.